Awesome, guys. Well, I'm so excited for the webinar today with Jessica Bealer of Generis. I'm really excited for this one just because I've been looking over the outline and planning the outline of what we're going to talk about. And it's going to be full of great content that I really feel like is going to help a lot of ministry leaders. And, this webinar is something that we've done a little bit here at TrainedUp. And what we want to do with these is just have an authentic conversation with the guests that we get to bring on. And so I'm really excited that Jessica's on the other end of this conversation today, and she's going to be sharing a ton of great insight, a ton of secrets, and we're going to try and get her to reveal as much as possible that she's holding close to her heart on the issue of volunteer systems and what it means to be a great volunteer leader inside of your church. And if you don't know me, I'm Kevin Fontenot. I am the VP of Growth here at TrainedUp. And at TrainedUp, we get to help a lot of pastors and ministry leaders do online training. And with that, we like to be very people-oriented. So we don't just build software and hope people use it, but we're in the trenches with you, and we're having conversations with you to make sure that you understand that we know what we're doing, that we know how to help you fulfill what you need to do inside of your ministry. And these webinars are an extension of that. So Jessica, I'd love for you to just introduce yourself a little bit and tell us more about what you do, your ministry, and how everyone can learn more about you.
Sure, yeah. So this is my 18th year. I'm getting ready to start my 19th year, but this is my 18th year in family ministry. Now, I've done all kinds of ministry, but this is my 18th year actually focusing on family ministry. And it started when I was 19 years old. I'm totally revealing my age right now. Started when I was 19 years old. My dad was a church planter. And he said, Jess, I need you. I was in college at the time. I'm going to become a broadcaster on WBLT in Knoxville. I did that for a little while. But he said, I need you to run the children's ministry at that time. And I said, Dad, I don't like kids and I do not want to be in ministry. And isn't that just like God being like, ha, 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 that's really ironic if that's the plan I have for you. And so he sent me to this church. You may have heard of them. They're called North Point. They're in Atlanta.
That's just a small church in Atlanta, right?
Little organization. Yeah, just a little organization there. And he said, I'm going to send you down there for a weekend and then this conference. And he said, I want you to, or it's a conference, and then you could stick around for the weekend. He said, I want you to go see everything and learn everything that you can. And I was like, okay. And so I went to this conference called Grow Up. And if anyone was listening, Grow Up is what Orange was before Orange was orange. Again, revealing my age. Like before there was Orange, there was a conference called Grow Up, and it was Reggie and Andy, and they did it at their church. And so I went and realized that church could actually be fun for kids, and realized that we could actually make a great impact for the next generation. And I sold out to ministry at 19 years old, and I did some other things. I mean, I was bivocational. When you're a church plant, there's no money. And so everybody's bivocational. And bivocational just means you're getting like $25 a week, And so I was bivocational. So I did some other things as well, like the broadcasting, and I was marketing director for a financial institution. But I never stepped away from ministry. I was always active in ministry. And I was 18 years ago. I've only ever been at 2 churches. I was with my dad at his church until he retired and stepped away. And then, a couple of years before that, we transitioned to Charlotte, and I supported from Charlotte. But when we transitioned to Charlotte, we got plugged in with another little church, you might have heard of them, called Elevation. And they were actually kind of small or smallish at the time. They were around 2,000 people when we started attending, which for them is small. And they had 3 locations at that point. And we kind of plugged in, and we were what you call volunteer staff. Like that's, everybody, I'm sure there are people that are watching this like, oh, that's me. I'm a volunteer and I'm on staff as well. And so we were volunteer staff. And so Frank and I quickly kind of went on staff there. We stepped away from our secular jobs, went on staff. We ended up on the executive team at Elevation. And we were there for, actually on staff, we were there for almost 6 years on the executive team. And he was really like the ministry's pastor. He oversaw everything. I oversaw family ministry for him, and launched 16 locations for them. And so I did launch 3 with my dad and 16, and then I helped a church launch a few months back. So I'm right at 20 locations right now, which was exciting to kind of hit that milestone. about a year and a half ago, we transitioned to Atlanta, and my husband became the executive director at Orange. He is kind of Reggie Dorner's right hand, and I went on staff with Generis, and Generis is a organization that in the past has done generosity consulting. So they help churches if they have a capital campaign or they need a capital campaign, or maybe their tithing or giving has gone down. They'll kind of help them dive into that. But they wanted to go into church ministry consulting, and so I lead the family ministry division of that. And so I travel all over the world really, because I've been to out of the country a couple of times, and help churches look at their systems, their standards, their atmospheres. We talk about volunteer experience. So anything like that is what I oversaw at Elevation. And so that's where I get the most questions that I get are about volunteers, which I feel like is, like the topic of the day. It couldn't be more relevant for church, especially going into the new year, just knowing that it's time to look at your systems and evaluate, like, hey, are we setting ourselves up for success in 2019? But it was the most asked question when I would get questions at Elevation when people would call. It was the most asked question. How can I get more volunteers? And it always still is to this day. I get two questions when it comes to family ministry. I get other questions in different areas, but two questions. The first one is, how do I get more volunteers? And the second one is, how do we engage more with parents? It's like the two questions that I get consistently. So that kind of tells you a little bit about where I am and what I've done. If you want to connect with me after it's over with, I'm on social media at Jessica Bealer. Bealer spelled funny, it's Bealer, but it's at Jessica Bealer on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. That's kind of where you can find me at. My book is Don't Quit. You can get it on Amazon, on Kindle or paperback. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Well, we're hoping to get lots of people the insight that you have so that you'll want to go follow Jessica on all those channels and buy the book and listen to her podcast. Jessica, one of the things that I hear over and over again is we get to talk with thousands of ministry leaders and pastors at TrainedUp. And it feels like everyone knows that volunteers are important at this point. Like, we don't have to sound the gong anymore of, you need volunteers. It feels like most pastors that I talk to understand they need volunteers, but they just don't really know how to evaluate what they're doing. They know it's important. They know they need to do something. They know they kind of have some volunteers and they get people to show up. But yeah. I'd really love to hear from you on just the first steps. And I think is really important for us to understand of how to evaluate our current volunteer systems. Because I think we have to know how to evaluate those things before we can start implementing better things inside those. So I'd love to hear any thoughts you have around that.
Yeah, for sure. So, I actually wrote an article about this topic just a couple of months back. And the best way to fill your ministry with volunteers is to keep the ones that you currently have. And I know that people are like, but I don't have enough now. And I'm like, yes, I know. But if you aren't keeping the people that you currently have, then you have more than just the fact that you have a deficit. Like there's more problems than that. And so I think we have to kind of start with how are we keeping the people that we do have? Because I will tell you, a long-term committed volunteer is the best walking billboard that you could possibly have. They will just talk about your ministry. If they love what they do, they will talk about it to family. They'll talk about it to neighbors, to coworkers. They won't be able to shut up about your ministry. And so I'm always like, are you keeping the people that you do have? And so I think when we look at it from that perspective, okay, are we keeping the people we do have? And kind of what you said, the way that you phrased it, let's look at our current system and evaluate those. I think it starts with asking, is my ministry attractive? I think that's a really, really key, because nobody wants to be a part of a sinking ship. No one wants to be a part of a losing team. And so if you look around at your ministry and, it's cluttered. I'm working with a couple churches right now that I literally saw pictures of their rooms. So I was like, you have beautiful space, but it's really, really cluttered, and what is that telling to parents and to potential volunteers? Because parents are potential volunteers, And so, you have to look at your space, but it's not just about how neat and clean, although that is, key. It's also about things just like, how are your volunteers happy? Are they smiling? Is it pleasant, or are they kind of doing it begrudgingly? She asked me and I felt obligated, so I'm back here. Is it cold at the door when kids are, dropping off and picking up? And does it smell bad? I can't tell you how many times that I have walked into a church and they, like, I'm not joking, like somebody has burnt popcorn in like the volunteer lounge, and you walk in, it smells like burnt popcorn. And that, like, it's just a terrible smell, and like people don't like it. And in family ministry specifically, like if you walk down the hall and it smells like dirty diaper, like nobody wants to be a part of that. And so, like, I mean, even down to the smallest details, like how does my ministry look? Are my volunteers happy? And not just in children's ministry, but everywhere. I mean, if you're parking, if your parking people are out there and they're just standing there like stone faced and, like moving their arm right back, I will never forget my favorite parking volunteer of all time was at Elevation Gaston, and he had 52 hats. And he wore a different hat, and they were funny hats, like really funny hats. And he wore a different hat every single week. And so you kind of look forward when you were pulling on to seeing what kind of hat he had on, and that's the kind of thing. It's like, man, these people really love being here. Like they love what they're doing. They always have a smile on their face. It's beautiful. It's clean. It's excellent. It smells good. And everyone is smiling. Like I want to be a part of that. So I think it kind of starts with, is your ministry attractive?
I like that. I feel like one of the things that typically happen in the mindset of a ministry leader is we think we have to fix the number problem first. We're like, okay, I'm really struggling with volunteers, so I'm going to post some statuses on Facebook. I'm going to text some people. I'm like, hey, we really need volunteers, and we send out a message of desperation, hoping that people are going to come in. When in reality, that never works. Right. We maybe get one or two volunteers, and they'll do it for a couple months and then go away. Why is it so important to have a spirit of excellence up front in your volunteer ministries?
Yeah, because I mean, people want to be called to something significant, right? It drives me crazy when I hear a leader say something like, "Would you mind? It's not that big a deal. It's only 1 week a month." And I'm like, no, it's a really big deal. Like we are working for the King of Kings, like we are employed by the Savior of the universe. What we do is a really, really big deal, and people want to be called to something significant. They want to be a part of something excellent. I mean, like we said, nobody wants to be a part of a losing team. Everybody wants to be a part of the championship winning team. Like everybody wants that. And so when you walk in and when you see these volunteers who are happy and who are excited and who you've thought through every single detail of the experience, like people are like, I want to be a part of this. Like I want to engage in this. Most of my experience is, from two churches. So I will probably refer to Elevation frequently because it's where most of I'm super loyal. I've been to 2 churches in 18 years. My dad's in Elevation. And so a lot of my illustrations will be from there. And we had a very, very, they are highly committed to excellence in the details. I don't know if anybody's been to any of their campuses or even online, you can tell for sure. But when you walk in, it's something that you want to buy into. From week one, I remember when Frank and I first walked in, I was like, whoa, like I've never seen church done like this. And it wasn't about the message, although Pastor Stephen's an incredible communicator. It wasn't about the worship, although worship is incredible, and the children's ministry was amazing and my kids loved it. It was the volunteers. When I was getting out of my car, someone standing there saying, hey, how are you today? Like greeting me, walking me in. Hey, you don't know where to check in? Let me go and help your family over here and get checked in. Let me give you a seat. We've saved you a seat up front, with all of these details. So when you have an experience and when your volunteers are pursuing excellence, it makes people want to be a part of that as well. So yeah, I think that's a great question, Kevin. Really great question. Something else is the volunteer experience as far as keeping your volunteers. Is the experience good or bad? And the question that you should ask yourself is, would you sign up today? Like if you're coming into the hallway or you're coming into the doors and you see that, and like what you experience, what you see, would you personally sign up? If you wouldn't, you probably have a problem. There's a problem. It's got to be fixed, If you're like, yeah, of course we would. Okay, well then maybe we just need to work on, keeping the volunteers that we do have and bettering their experience. But, and maybe even getting the word out and clarifying how people sign up. But I think a lot of times we think, well, this is people's sacrifice and this is, and this is maybe they're called to do this or whatever it may be, whatever justification kind of we use in our brain for that. At the same time, like they're, yes, maybe God has designed them to play this part. And yes, maybe this is exactly where they're supposed to be. But if you aren't doing your part to set them up for success, if you aren't doing their part to empower them and to encourage them, then they'll lose sight of your vision really, really quickly. And so you have to look at your experience. So when I think of volunteer experience, like some good things I think you could evaluate, so some factors that you could look at. I'm thinking, do volunteers clearly know their role? Like, do they know when I step on campus, this is what I'm supposed to do, and this is how I'm supposed to do it, and I know the expectations that you placed upon me. The most frustrating thing ever is to show up and not have anything to do, and people are like, oh yeah, and then you're like, you didn't even need me, why am I here? And then those people won't be back. And then the other thing is to show up and for you to kind of get into trouble, for something that you didn't even know that you were supposed to do. That's a sure recipe for not coming back as well. So clear expectations. Also, like empowerment. I'm really a big believer on letting people make mistakes. Like that's how you learn. I'm so glad that I had amazing leaders in my life that let me make mistakes. And so, like, are you allowing people to own their part of your ministry? If you aren't, if you're micromanaging every single little detail, if you're only giving them tasks, the buy-in is not going to be to the depth and to the level that you need it to be. And so, one of the things you can ask yourself is, what are some tasks that I do on a weekly basis, or what are some things that I do on a weekly basis that I could hand over and let someone run with and put their own creative spin on it? So I feel like empowerment is a really big deal. And then appreciation, and we're going to talk about it a little later, I think, but appreciation is key. I mean, you have to appreciate. People do not realize that you're thankful unless you say it. They just think that they're being overlooked. So appreciation is key. I have this formula in my book, and it's clarity plus empower. It's a volunteer strategy formula. It's clarity plus empowerment plus longevity. Plus appreciation equals longevity. So clarity plus empowerment plus appreciation equals longevity. So if we will clarify our expectations, if we will empower people to make key decisions at critical moments, if we will appreciate them for their sacrifice and their commitment, they'll stick around for the long haul. They'll have our back. They'll be with us for years to come.
Yeah, that's so good. One of the things that we're big believers in at TrainedUp as well is asking people how you're doing and actually putting surveys out to your teams and really soliciting their feedback. And you have to be careful with that because, people don't want to offend you and they don't want to put negative comments, and make sure that you're telling people that you want their honest feedback. You really want to know what they're thinking about volunteering, about the process. And we have some great resources on TrainedUp for free about volunteer surveys and how you can send them out and the questions to ask, that you can go to our website and just chat with us there and we can point you in the right direction to get a hold of those. But that's a big part of it as well, because if you don't know what's currently going on inside of your systems, inside of your teams, it's hard to change that. We can talk about all the strategy that we want to, and a lot of it, like we'll hear strategy, we'll think, oh yeah, that's really good, but it's not for me. When in reality, you really need to implement that advice inside your ministry. You're just not aware of the problem. So Jessica, I'd love to kind of transition a little bit and for you to kind of give us a picture of what this healthy volunteer system looks like. Everything from signing up, from recruiting to onboarding to following up with people. I'd love to just kind of get an insight based off of, those small churches that you've been at and served at, what that looks like and how we can implement that in our church as well.
Yeah, so I think a lot of times we make it too hard to volunteer. We make it really complicated, like, oh, well, you have to go over here, and then you're going to have to do this, and you have to do this, and then like 6 weeks from now, we're going to have you end up, and the thing is, when God speaks, he speaks like right then, and the person is like, okay, I'm going to be obedient, God, I'm going to go sign up to volunteer. And if there is not a clear path right then for them to go and sign up and for them to, to move down this journey of signing up and this pathway, then you'll eventually, you'll just lose people. Again, I'm working with a different church right now that they never talk about volunteering from the stage. It's never mentioned. Like they mention it once a year, maybe. They never mention it from the stage. People don't know where to go. And even if they went there, it happens so infrequently that when people go there, people are like, oh, right. we have a form somewhere. Hold on, let me go find it. And so I think it's really key for us to make it really, really clear. And so I would encourage you, and I know that a lot of people that are listening, that they're not at the top of the food chain. They're not the senior pastor or the lead pastor. But I think it's good to initiate a conversation with your leadership and just say, hey, how can we talk about this a little bit more? We are not desperate. You never, never, never want to convey desperation from the stage, ever. But at the same time, there is an opportunity. And so I would probably say something like this from the stage, something along the lines of, hey, here at ABC Church, we just wanted to let you know there's a couple opportunities that you can connect with us on a deeper level. One of those is you can sign up for a small group. Go out to the first impressions table and they will help you do that. The other opportunity is by serving, by getting plugged in and actually being a part of a team and making a difference. You could also do that out in the lobby. And that's it. Nothing, like super, super complicated. Something else that you could do, another just idea to kind of initiate that in the main service, is to have some B-roll, shoot some B-roll, not anything super complicated, of serving, and just talk about it. Talk about serving. Like, hey, we just want to say, like in Thanksgiving, like it's a great time to be like, hey, we just want to say thank you to everyone who served, and have B-roll going behind you. You're not actually asking anyone. You're just, again, making your ministry really attractive. So I think you have to, if you're going to onboard people, it starts by just showing them and clearly expressing that within the main worship auditorium or the main worship service, however you all phrase it. And then, so I think that's really important. I also think it has to be really clear where they go and how they sign up. I was working with a church a little while back, and the only way to sign up was online. You had to go online and sign up. And they were super excited about it. And I went on and I was like, okay, well, it's very easy to navigate online. The problem is my grandmother could never serve at your church, or anyone who may not, have a computer. They probably are going to struggle to serve at your church. And then I had the opposite happen. I had someone who they couldn't serve online, or they couldn't sign up online. The church actually had an app, and the church had an app, but you couldn't sign up to volunteer on the app. And so you really have to be kind of all encompassing. Like, what are we doing to help them sign up online? Because that's one generation of people. What are we doing to help them sign up in person? And that in person is really key, because it's so important, because people want to take a step the moment that God speaks to their heart. So it's really important that you have something right then for them to go do. And then, as far as like what you're going to do, there's a million different ways. You need to have one very easy to fill out form where you're just collecting information: name, phone number, email. That's it. Like when they want to come to their volunteer orientation, and that's pretty much it. You can do all the follow-up on the back end. If you make them stand there and fill out a whole bunch of forms, then it's going to feel a little overwhelming, especially for brand new people who've never volunteered. But you need to have a form there, and then there needs to be some follow-up, and there needs to be a volunteer orientation. The volunteer orientation can be done 100 different ways. Ours was done we had 2 services at all of our campuses. And so we did the volunteer orientation during the first service. And so they could come during the first service, attend during the second. They were already coming on Sundays. It wasn't a night out. We tried to make it as easy and convenient for them as possible. And so it was just kind of like what they're already going to do, kind of getting them in that mindset of, hey, we're going to ask you to serve one and attend one. So you're going to be here for two services. And so we're just going to go ahead and kind of start that habit, first off. So I think that's important as well. There does need to be like an actual onboarding process of someone who's in the ministry, essentially waiting on them, the Sunday, their first Sunday. We call their empowerment. It kind of went along with elevation. It was fun. But there was somebody, when they arrived, there was like a table with balloons, and they went to that table and they got their box, and it was their volunteer t-shirt and their volunteer schedule and their volunteer key tag. And there was a gift from Pastor Stephen. There was a coupon for some elevation swag. It was really fun. And your favorite candy was in that box. And then they were taken back to essentially their mentor, their coach, and the coach worked with them all day long to help them. And there's lots of different models for coaching as well, but it is really important that you assign them a coach or a mentor to help them navigate those first few weeks. And again, it's also really important that you make it very clear, both during the volunteer orientation and during the coaching, that, hey, if this is not a fit, no big deal. Like, you could, maybe you signed up for parking and this isn't working for you. Or maybe you signed up for babies and thinking this is great. And now like the crying is giving you a headache, and you're getting a migraine and like, it's okay. We can find somewhere else for you to serve. But if you don't assign them a coach and a mentor from the very beginning, they won't have those conversations. They'll just stop showing up after a couple of weeks when they're not happy. They just, won't show up. So I think that's really, really important as far as the onboarding. And then also just some follow up. I mean, you need to kind of like what you said, like ask the questions. A month or two in, somebody needs to be calling them and saying, hey, how's it going? Are you enjoying yourself? Are you enjoying the team that you're on? So there needs to be some follow up. So that's like kind of an all encompassing, like, this is, how we onboard volunteers. It's all intentionality. I think that's the thing. If you're waiting for people to stumble onto your ministry or stumble onto volunteering, then you're never going to fill your rosters.
Yeah, absolutely. It has to be an intentional process. And that's the
Yes.
biggest portion of, I think, what you're saying, Jessica, is from how people sign up, how you're talking about it. They need to know that it's intentional. You talk about elevation and how you guys do things and did things there. And for smaller churches, which is, the majority of churches in America, it can become really intimidating. Like, okay, elevation obviously has all this money. They have all these staff people. And so when you talk about things like a gift and boxes and handing out, it can feel like, oh, I don't think I can ever do that in my church. I attend a church of 300 people, and in my church, we are able to still do things well. For instance, we honor a team of the month every single month from stage. We have that dream team of the month that we call it. And it was small groups, and I'm one of our small group leaders. And so my wife and I were the dream teamers of the month this past month. And so we get this little plaque, a handwritten card, and then just a small gift inside of that. And something like that makes such a big impact for both the volunteers that are already serving, because they know that they're going to get honored, that they're going to be appreciated, but it also makes a big impact on those people that are looking to sign up. So when you're talking about it from the stage, it creates that longing for belonging inside of the ministry. It makes it really easy for people to be like, yeah, I want to be a part of that, because I see that it's important. I see that people really value it inside of the church.
Yes. And as far as small churches, everything we talked about, it sounds flashy and beautiful, and and you're like, I don't have money. Well, I was at a church of 300 people, so I totally get it. We didn't have that kind of budget either. I do think though that you can still do all of those steps at your level, whatever level that is. I mean, excellence is defined in different environments, it's very, very, it's still very much a possibility to be intentional about this. A volunteer orientation class, a lot of people are like, can you give me the booklet? And I'm like, oh my gosh, our booklet's like 27 pages. You don't need that. Like, you don't need that. And so, I always tell everybody, a volunteer orientation class does 3 things and 3 things only. It tells you the heart of the house, the vision behind what you're doing, like why you're doing it, why these people are signing up to be a part of it. Then it sets expectations. What can you expect from me as a volunteer, and what can I expect from you as the person who's going to be leading me? So it's just setting expectations. And then the third one, it's telling them all the different options that they have, all the different opportunities across your church. That's it. That's all that it has to be. It does not have to be complicated. It can be very, very simple. And as far as like the coach and the mentor, you don't have to have a box. It would be nice to, like, when the person walked in, to be like, hey, this is our new team member, and everyone be like, oh, hey, we're so excited that you're here. That does the same exact thing. And so it's all just about, like, how are you intentionally setting them up for success in this new role?
That's good. One of the things you mentioned very briefly that I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about is really twofold. Is one, the test drive process, just because I feel like that's something that doesn't typically exist in a lot of churches. We sign someone up for a new volunteer and we expect them to serve a life sentence right then. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, I would encourage you, and people are going to be like, oh my gosh, I will lose half of my teams. But I would encourage you to have a commitment card or form or something that has a time limit on it, and let them re-up. And it does a couple things. I know people are like, oh my gosh, if I ask everyone, do they want to sign up, they're all going to quit. No, they won't. They won't quit. And if they are going to quit, they don't need to be there anyways. They're probably dragging your team down. We did this, and every single year we had somewhere between an 83 and a 90% retention rate. And honestly, the people that we weren't retaining, they weren't showing up anyways. So it ended up being okay. But what it does is, for them, it reiterates their commitment. Like, oh yeah, I'm signing up one more time. I'm in this, and it gives you an opportunity. If they're struggling for something when you're doing a re-up, it gives them the opportunity to say, hey, I've been struggling with the curriculum. There's just one aspect and it's really kind of frustrating me. And it's something that when you can speak into, you can speak into it and you can avoid their exit. So I think that a re-up is really, really important, even whether it's 6 months, 3 months, a year. I mean, I would probably do 6 months or a year is probably what I would suggest. But as far as like the test drive as well, I live in practical. And so the way that I would do this, if I were a smaller church, I would, every time that I added a new volunteer, I would go onto my calendar and I would schedule a time for me to follow up with that person's phone number in my calendar. And it would say, follow up with Emily, about her, and it would be 6-8 weeks out. To say, hey, how are you doing? Do you like it? It's okay if you don't like it. Just say that, like call the elephant, in the room out and be like, hey, are you liking this? No, I'm kind of getting this vibe that you're not really liking it. Okay, well, let's try something else. Like we want you to have a great volunteer experience, and that may not be in whatever role you first committed to. So I think in smaller churches, it's that. In larger churches, you can build a system where you have the reports and, you assign a volunteer or a staff member to follow up with all of these people at a certain time. So, I mean, depending on what your size is, it's going to look different, but it's really all the same in that it's just a call and it's just having a conversation with them.
Yeah, the biggest portion of it is just remembering to do it. Because if you think that you're going to do it and don't write it down, don't set a reminder, don't have a system, it's not going to happen. The biggest thing is you have a small computer that fits in your pocket. And the great thing is you can tell whatever virtual assistant you use, I'll be nice to the Android people and the iPhone people. You can just say, hey, Google, remind me in 6 weeks to follow up with Ben to see how he's doing on our team. And it's as simple as that. And once you do that, then you're going to remember to follow up with them. If not, you're going to be like, oh man, it's been 8 months and I never followed up with that person. And that person is really struggling with being in part of the ministry and they want to do something else, but you use some language that was desperate to get them on the team in the first place.
Or they're not there. They're like gone. That's the other thing. You're like,
yeah, absolutely. You're like, oh, I thought they were still serving. And you realize they haven't been there in like 7 months.
Right.
Awesome. So I'd love to go into one more thing real quick before we go into some Q&A, because we have a couple questions that are in. I'd love for you to kind of briefly talk about the idea of empowering volunteers to recruit people, just because I think there's a really interesting aspect. And one of the biggest ways that your church and ministries can be more effective at recruiting volunteers is to use the people you already have. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, once you've established a great volunteer experience, people are going to want to talk about it. And so it's really, really important that you put language around what you do. So for us, it was having very, very key values. Like these are the things that we value. And like that. And then there was also I wrote a quote down. It's in my notes here. This is from my book. It's from chapter 9, where I have a whole chapter in there about language. And it says, think of your language as a secret handshake to the greatest club ever created. Think of your language as a secret handshake to the greatest club ever created. Because, man, when you are part of a winning volunteer team for the Lord, it is so fulfilling. It is so fulfilling. And when you can wrap language around it, so you give people verbiage, things that they can talk about, they will be your recruiters. So, we would say things like our values. I'll just go through those. Our values were, we will make it safe. We made it really easy. We will make it safe. We will share Jesus with passion. We will bring the fun. We will connect the family. Those were our 4. We said that so frequently, all the time, that they knew the heartbeat of the ministry. So when they were talking to their neighbor about it, and their neighbor was like, well, I have kids and I just don't know if when I'm serving, what are we going to do with the kids? She can say, oh, well, we prioritize fun. It's in our values. They're going to have a lot of fun. I promise, And so you have to give them some language for it. And I think that it's really key that not the values are great, but I also think that you have to it starts with kind of don't just start with the mission statement, although that's good. You need to have that. That's really, really key. But I think it's also funny stories that you can turn into some language. We had, this is one of those things, Kevin, that I'm going to talk about that I probably shouldn't talk about, that we, you and I were talking about earlier. And I was like, I'll just say things sometimes. But we had a guy who at one point, he couldn't get into the building. He was struggling to get into the building, and it was very, very key for him to open the building up so that we could start setup, because it was a non-permanent location. And he couldn't get into the building because the gate was locked, and he was getting ready to run his truck through the locked gate. And he was literally like, so when, right when people showed up, and it all worked out, and we didn't have to like run the truck through the gate. But what ended up happening, what came out of that, is this phrase called ram the gate. And we would say, well, have you rammed the gate? And essentially what we were saying is, have you done everything possible in your, in your capability to do to achieve whatever it is? So we had this little like silly phrase, right? Like ram the gate. So sometimes when something is catching fire in your culture and like it's sticky, like it's those inside jokes that people are like, well, and they share. Well, use that, turn it into the language, and then empower people to go out. The other thing too is make sure that they understand, again, this goes back to clarity, but make sure they understand the vision and the heart of your house as a whole. Like, it was really important for us. One of our values is we want to be known for what we are for, not against. We want to be known what we were for, because we are for people. We are for families. We were for individuals. We were for them. And so it was really important for us, for our people to understand that. So when they're out talking and to somebody and they're like, man, you should come and serve. And they're like, I don't know. Like, I've heard things about your church, or I don't even know about church, or whatever it is. They can be like, no, our church, like, our value is that we are for you. So you need to give them things like phrases that they could use that would essentially set them up for success in these conversations. And then spoil them and appreciate them so they brag on you, right? I mean, I say all the time, we need to create remarkable moments that people will remark on. Like, it has to go beyond the Sunday morning, beyond the Saturday night, whatever your experience time is, it has to go beyond that. And so we're trying to create remarkable moments, both for parents and for volunteers. So do something like, if a volunteer does something great, have a stash of like little presents. I always used to have a go-to stash of presents. So when somebody did something great, I would appreciate them right then on the spot. I'd go to my little stash, I'd write up a note, and I would go and say, hey, thank you for doing that. This is just a little token of my appreciation. Thank you so much. I'm creating a remarkable moment. They are definitely going to go somewhere and talk about what just happened. So create remarkable moments. Give them some language that they can talk about. Make sure that they understand the heart of the house and the values of your ministry.
Awesome. That's so good. I love that. Giving the language and the remarkable moments. A lot of companies will call them marketable moments.
Yep.
And it's that same type of concept. Like, if you do cool things and you help people out and you're great with the people that are actually serving, people like to talk about that. It's just something
Right.
that brings up naturally. Whereas if it's the opposite side of that, people still want to talk about it, but they're not going to talk about it in the best light. And so it's about us controlling the narrative and being able to empower people to talk about the things we want them to talk about.
Well, and you just talked about it, right? Like, you just talked about how your ministry honored you and your wife. And so, I mean, they created a remarkable moment that made a milestone in your mind. And then the next opportunity that you had to talk about it, you did. And so, like, that's what we want to do for the people who are serving in our ministry.
Awesome. Well, we have some questions, and we have about 5 minutes left of the webinar. So let's just try and go through these with some quick answers and just kind of a couple of really key things here. So Riley asked, what are some keys to improving current volunteer teams?
Okay, so if we're talking about teams as a whole, like all the teams across your ministry, I think it's really important for you to bring like collaboration together. Like, teams need to work together. And so, sit the leaders of those teams around a table and have some communication. Like, hey, what's going right? What's going wrong? How can we fix this? And bring them all together. If we're talking about an individual team, like a person, like, this team is really, really unhealthy. Again, it starts with a conversation with the leader of that team. Or maybe it's unhealthy because you don't have a leader and you need to assign a leader. That's a possibility as well. But I mean, it all starts with intentional communication and sitting down face to face, not via text, not via email. We try to solve way too many problems via email. And so, like, it comes to sitting down and working through the problems and putting actionable steps in place. So, give you a real quick example. I had a team once that the leader was a great guy. He was awesome. But he, during their team meeting, he started to do a devotional. And at first it was great. It was just a 2-3 minute quick devotional. Before I knew it, the devotional had spun out of control, and it was 15 minutes, and people were like, I just want to get in my class. I'm like, they're stressed out, And so I had this team that was super healthy eventually get to the point to where they were very stressed and people were unhappy and they didn't want to be on the team. And I had no idea. I just thought, well, the guy's doing devotional. He's coming like super prepared, you know? And so then when I sat down with a couple of people that were, you know, voicing these concerns, I realized, oh, well, this is a very simple problem with a very simple solution. I need to go talk to the leader and say, hey, keep your devotional under 5 minutes, you know? And we made that small little change, and it changed the dynamics of the team entirely. So it starts with talking to individuals on the team who are either expressing concerns and frustration or going to the leader and saying, hey, it's just not right. What are you seeing?
Yeah, that's so good. And again, I'll plug those surveys that we have available on TrainedUp. So if you head over to TrainedUp afterwards and just chat with our team, we can give you a link to those surveys. And those are a great way for you to get insight into your volunteer team. Like I said, you know, if you don't set something up, if you don't set a reminder to do it, you're probably going to forget to do it. And those will help you to be able to do that regularly. So a couple of things that people are asking for clarification on, Jessica, are, can you give your formula again for longevity?
Yes, so clarity, so clear expectations, clarity, plus empowerment. And the way that I define empowerment is granting the authority to make key decisions at critical moments, plus appreciation. That's just, you know, saying thank you, showing gratitude for commitment and service equals longevity. So clarity plus empowerment plus appreciation equals longevity.
Awesome. And the other thing that someone wants clarification on is the 4 values that you guys had at Elevation.
Yeah, sure. So the really quickly, they were safety, Jesus, and just as a side note, safety does come before Jesus. So safety, Jesus, fun, and connectivity. So it was, we will make it safe. We will share Jesus with passion. We will bring the fun, and we will connect the family. So they were kind of like in order of importance, because safety was super important. Parents won't even give you their child if they don't feel like it's safe. And then Jesus, obviously that's why we're in it. And then fun, because fun and friends are why kids come to church and why students come to church. They don't come for Jesus. You should know that. They come for fun. We'd love for them to come for Jesus, but they come for fun and friends. We come for Jesus. So Jesus, and then fun, and then connectivity. We need to connect with the parents and with all the people who are walking through our doors. We need to connect with them.
Awesome. So there's one more question that came in that I want us to just briefly touch on. I know we're right at the time limit, but this question is, how can you change volunteer culture or bring in time commitments or re-up options when there's a good chunk of volunteers who have been doing it for 20 years and aren't really into change? This is something that comes up a lot with what we do at TrainedUp. And so I'd love to hear what your answer is here, Jessica.
Yeah. Okay. So I think it starts by you. Okay. First of all, the first thing that you can do is you need to come up with some changes that you want to make. So some ideas, initiatives. How do you want to innovate your ministry? Some things that you want to see happen. And then make sure that you also define the end result. So these are the things I'd like to do because these are the end results I want to see. And then those people, go get them and ask them for their opinion. So like probably not in a group. I would probably do it individually because, you know, you can kind of get ganged up on a little bit. But I would probably do it individually. I would say, hey, this is what I'm thinking and this is where I'm planning on going. Do you agree this is where we need to end up? Okay, so that's really easy. If you ask that question, do you agree this is where we need to end up? They're going to say yes. Okay, this is what I'm thinking about doing. What do you see? What obstacles do you see? How can we implement it? And so bring them into the creative process. Now, at the end of the day, you're going to do what you need to do. But if they feel like they've been a part of the decision-making process, they'll be much more apt to go along with you. Now, I will tell you, there are some people who need to move on from your ministry. And it's okay for you to sit down and say to them, hey, listen, you know, this is where we're going. Do you think you can get on board? Do you think you can support me? If they say yes, okay. Well, then put a plan in place for that. If they say no, then say, okay, it might be time just to step away. And then put it on your calendar for like 3 to 6 months down the road to follow up with that person, because they may want to come back and to get back on board again. And you don't want to say, hey, let's take a break, when you're actually meaning I'm firing you from volunteering. If you're going to say, let's take a break, okay, let's take a break. I'm going to follow up. I'm going to add it to my calendar. 6 months from now, I'm going to call you and we're going to see if now is a better season for you. But I mean, again, it's all about the one-on-one conversation. I will say that I have a chapter like we were talking about so much stuff that I have already written about, and I have a whole chapter about conflict resolution, and there's 3 steps of how to have those icky conversations in there. And so like there's a whole chapter in my book about conflict. It's actually called the 3 C's of healthy conflict resolution. But don't avoid the conversation. And let me just give you a little, like, this is a tweetable statement. Don't make overarching rules for underlying problems. It's super important that you don't make a rule because you don't want to have a conversation. So don't make overarching rules for underlying problems. You got to go straight to the root and have conversations.
Yeah, one quick thing that I'll add to that is you're the leader of the ministry. Like there
Yes.
is a point in time that you have to take charge of what you're doing. And the biggest way to influence people that are not into change and they've been doing it for a long time is reminding them of the why behind what you're doing. If you can communicate changes based on the vision and the mission of what you guys are doing in the ministry, people are more likely to buy into it at that point. And if they don't buy into it at that point, then it's time to have that conversation like Jessica has, and maybe either let them go or take some time off away from the ministry and then have that conversation again in the future. But that's something that we've seen to be a really key aspect, is bringing it back into the why behind what it is that you're doing. Because if people will understand that, they're more likely to be willing to facilitate the change at that point.
Yeah, that's great, Kevin. Really great.
Awesome. Well, that's going to do it for the webinar today. I hope this was really helpful content for everyone that's listening. If you do have any questions afterwards that we weren't able to get to, feel free to head over to trainedup.church. We'd love to be able to continue to have a conversation with you. Our whole team will be there the rest of the day, and we'll be happy to have that conversation with you.